It is a brand new edition of Flyers Daily, the 29th of July. I guess the last episode of the month of July will be on Wednesday. Flyers Daily is always presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Joining us as he does every Monday for a Pepper Pod episode from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. It is Bill Meltzer. Flyers apparently, and Flyers Twitter and didn't get the memo, Bill. This is the slow time of the year. Maybe they're waiting for the month to flip to August coming up on Thursday.
Yeah, and here I was thinking we'd be talking about the World Junior Summer Showcase starting today, but no, that's for content later in the week, online. So
yeah, I mean, it's been talking point after talking point as things have kind of come through this summer for an offseason that I kind of described last week in our episode as kind of being, lackluster, if you will, and not a whole lot happening. A whole lot is kind of happening, and stories kind of coming out in dribs and drabs. It's not all coming out of the faucet at once, but it's coming out in pieces, and let's tackle it. We're going to get to a bunch of Ask Billy questions for this episode as well. I thought it was a good time to take some questions. We have some really good ones that came in, but let's first tackle the Kolosov situation, because that's been the hot topic of the last couple of days. We know apparently that he slept through a flight that he was supposed to come over. We know about some of the rumors that have been out there that he told the Flyers he didn't want to return, that he was homesick last year. There's a whole litany of different reasons why people are kind of jumping to conclusions on why that is. Didn't speak the language, was in a hotel, joined a team late in the year, had a hard time assimilating, all of those things. But to separate some fact from fiction, and we don't know if some things are fiction yet. A lot of the stories we see don't have any direct quote from he or his agent.
Yeah, or anybody commenting from the Russian team that he played for, or league sources, or anything. There have been reports both from Belarus and from North America that have come out kind of in drips and drabs over this off season. So to try to put this all together in a coherent and a reputable way, I think you can look at what the timeline is, as well as best as we can determine what the organization has said. Which, mind you, what organizations say, whether it's the Flyers or any other organization, it's not gospel, right? They're what's known and what isn't known. But in this particular instance, sources within Flyers hockey operations have said that at no time did Kolosov tell the organization he's not coming back. The report out there that he told them right after the season, the organization denies that. They deny that either the player or Dynamo Minsk has asked the organization for any kind of a release from his contract. Now, remember, you go back a year, and the Flyers signed him to an entry-level contract, talking about Kolosov, the agreement being that he'd be loaned to Dynamo for one additional season, which would burn the first year of his entry-level contract because he's no longer slide rule eligible. So
which is a concession to him.
That's a pretty big concession, and yep. In return, there was a promise that he would come over after the season, that Brady Robinson, the Flyers developmental coach, and the organization in general would be able to communicate with the player throughout the season. So they were. It wasn't like the Flyers' relationship like with Siska, Red Army, with the Fedotov situation, where he just jumped contract and he went back there. And that was the whole Army thing and all that. I mean, of course, it all ended up with them coming over and being extended. But it's not the same situation. That Dynamo doesn't have the same sort of cash in the KHL and with the with the Belarusian team and the former Russian Federation. They don't have the kind of stature that Ziska has to be able to have a player come and jump. They're not a big budget team. They're just a whole lot of considerations. They don't have a kind of power. And B, they actually got in a pretty good working relationship with the Flyers over the past year. There was an agreement. There was a lot of transparency on both sides. We do know, of course, that Kolosov came over late in the AHL season.
March 11th, I believe.
Right around then. The final few weeks of the season, and the Phantoms played 6 playoff games. And even before he came over, the word was that they were going to ease him in because the Phantoms were trying to stake down a playoff spot. They didn't want to throw him to the wolves right away, and they had a veteran goalie in Cal Peterson, and they had another guy with some NHL experience in Felix Sandstrom. And the way it worked out was after they clinched, Kolosov got into 2 regular season games, started 2 games for the Phantoms, which kind of seemed to line up. In the playoffs, it was actually Felix Sandstrom was the odd man out because he was a healthy scratch throughout the playoffs. Fedotov didn't play, but he dressed as Peterson's backup.
You mean Kolosov, not Fedotov?
Pardon me, yes. Pardon me. Kolosov. And then season ended, and then reports came out not too long thereafter. I mean, before development camp, the first reports surfaced that he was unhappy over here, that he was homesick, that he wanted to go home. He was looking potentially going back to the KHL, going back to Dynamo. So the Flyers at the time said that was news to us. That's what the Flyers source said, and basically said the Kolosov side said there's nothing to that. He never, basically never told anybody that. So that things went quiet until development camp, and as you said, Kolosov was not at development camp. And then there was that bizarre report out of Belarus, and no reason to dispute it or to question it. It was just an odd report saying that he overslept his flight, and that's why he didn't come overseas to attend development camp. Which sounds odd, right? Something about that sounds strange.
That's the dog ate my homework.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't seem to add up. I've never heard of a player with a plane ticket and he oversleeps his flight, and all of a sudden he's not at a camp.
Yeah, it's not like you're flying from Philadelphia to Logan to go to Boston.
Exactly.
You're flying around the world.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going from Minsk to Moscow, and then another connecting flight, and then overseas. So that's
basically 22 hours, which Michkov just made that charter.
Exactly. The same kind of a route where you're it's like you just oversleep or what better get to the airport.
Yeah.
So that was strange. But the next reports after that, and it was actually on social media, there were photos of Kolosov in Belarus doing a summertime training session on the ice, and it was right before he got on the ice. And he posed for a picture with a kid at the rink in Belarus. What's interesting about it was that Kolosov is not only wearing Phantoms pads and his Phantoms mask, he's also wearing Phantoms jersey, head to toe. He's dressed like he's practicing for the Phantom season. Following that came reports that he was training with players from Dynamo Minsk,
which isn't uncommon.
Hardly uncommon. Very common for European players to train with European teams, particularly if it's a team they played for, and most especially if it's their hometown team. That's very common. But it was after that, a few days later, the first reports. Well, he's asked Dynamo to try to help him get out of his entry-level contract because he wants to stay home.
Let me just pause real quick because I want to go back to the seeing him in full Phantoms regalia.
Yeah.
When you train in the summer, you train in the equipment, and I don't just mean the jersey. I mean the equipment that you're going to wear that year. Yeah. It's a comfortability factor for a goaltender. If you're going to wear Phantoms or Flyers colored pads, you're going to practice in them in the summer. So the gloves, all of it, the set that's why it's not just the jersey that he was wearing, although I think that's interesting too, and the helmet, but it's the pads and the entire setup. So go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah. So he was training as he would, in the summertime, getting ready to come over. As you said, the pads he's comfortable in. Even, you might break in a mask during the preseason or whatever, but you have the equipment. You have the equipment you're used to playing with, and that he was wearing that rather than his old Dynamo gear because there's, as we saw with Fedotov, it's different gear over there than over here because of the pad regulations.
And which, by the way, he wore the Dynamo pads when I watched him in warm-ups in the playoff game in Allentown at the PPL Center.
Yeah.
So the Phantoms pads came after that.
Right. And so it was, always kind of that understanding they were going to break him in and get his feet wet and whatnot. And people in and around the Phantoms openly said, well, Alexei seemed very homesick. He was kind of withdrawn. He's a quiet kid anyway. Nobody ostracized him. Nobody excluded him. Nobody shunned him or anything like that. He was with the team day in and day out, and it wasn't like he just ignored everybody, but he was a little withdrawn. He didn't feel comfortable socializing, didn't feel but which is completely normal, not anything unusual, just that he was particularly quiet. Then the reports came from citing an AHL source. Tony Andrikaitis had it. That the AHL source said he informed the Flyers organization at the end of his stint with the fans before he went home that he did not intend to come back. That is something that the Flyers outright deny, said that is not true. And so take that one step further than that. Neither the player nor the team has contacted the Flyers and asked for a release from the contract. I'm going to explain why that's getting significant at this point in a second. But the other part of that is known. Kosov also didn't say, he also didn't confirm, say, yes, I'm coming. Yep. So the Flyers don't know for 100% sure that he's coming, but there's an assumption that he's coming because the KHL regular season is barely more than a month away. The KHL regular season starts on September the 3rd. So we're already at the end of July. They've already signed another goalie who they're intending to be the starter over there. Of course, things can always change, right? But they have 3 goalies on their preseason roster. 2 are young guys, 21 years old, but 2 old already for the junior team. So the 2 advanced for the MHL. One will probably make the team as the backup. The other one might be lent to a minor league team. But they're seem to be going ahead with a plan. They have their starter. They'll figure out their backup. Again, that's barely more than a month away. Regular season, September 3rd. Their own first game is September the 5th. If you're planning to bring Kolosov back, you'd want to arrange that release from his ELC sooner than later. Legally, the only place he can play is in the Flyers organization, whether that's with the Flyers or more likely with the Phantoms. Because he's under entry-level contract, and the Flyers already agreed to burn 1 year from it. They really don't want to burn a second. They want him to get experience. B, because the Flyers did strike an agreement a year ago with Dynamo that he would play over here after he finished last season there. Both sides upheld that. I don't see why Dynamo would even want to go back on that right now. Again, they've gone forward with another plan. The third part being that there's a non-interference agreement between the NHL and the KHL and valid contracts. Now, mind you, again, Siska broke that a year ago or 2 years ago. There was the whole one situation with Fedotov. Then there was him playing, even though he had a valid contract a year ago. But again, Dynamo is not Siska in terms of their power and their clout. So all these things kind of add up to the Flyers expect him to come over. Don't know for sure that he is, but deny that he's informed the organization or anybody's told them that he's not. So that's really kind of where things stand.
Okay, Bill, so let's dig into that one part of that in particular, the fact that he was homesick, which is not, to me, hard to believe at all. I mean, you're talking about a young player coming over at a time of the year when, let's just say, the group that's been together all year trying to see it through to go a playoff spot, it's not that they're not welcoming, but they are incredibly together at that point. It's the hardest time of the year, I think, for somebody to be integrated into a locker room. There's not a lot of social occasions that are going to take place. There's not a lot of, hey, all the boys are going out for dinner. They're buckling down trying to make the playoffs. And I saw some on social media saying, well, the Flyers prioritized Cal Peterson over Kolosov. Well, you don't want to bring Kolosov over and put him into that kind of pressure where if he performs or he doesn't, again, it's almost like playing a different game from the KHL to the AHL like it is the KHL to the NHL for a goaltender, that all of a sudden he comes over, he doesn't perform well, and doesn't have that time to adjust to this game and get adjust to his surroundings, and he's the reason why they don't make the postseason. And then you couple that with, look, I think they wanted him to come over here after his KHL season to just get over here and start to acclimate himself, to get into those 2 games and see what it feels like here, so you can take that knowledge into the offseason of what it's like to be a goalie in the AHL and playing pro hockey in North America. I never thought it would be to come over here and ride to the playoffs. For some reason, some want to say, well, Flyers didn't do enough, or Danny Briere didn't do enough to assimilate him. He was in a hotel, and look, if anybody was an athlete, I was a guy who was very talkative in a locker room all the years that I played. But whenever I went to a new team or I made a different team, I will tell you the first 45 days, I didn't say a whole heck of a lot because I had to figure out who was who in the room and all of that, not to mention the language situation. So it's not an easy thing to assimilate to. So I am, with Kolosov, I totally understand that. But where I'm trying to get, Bill, is, there wasn't another Russian-speaking player there for him. But I don't even think that you can add one that late into the season for him to have. Gurionov was here. I think part of the reason Gurionov was here and stayed here through the remainder of last season was for Fedotov. I mean, he sat with me in an interview with Fedotov to help him out. He wasn't playing, but that was his purpose at that point. So I don't know what else the organization can do. If he doesn't come over, I get it. You lose Gauthier. He didn't want to be here. That situation is what it is. Kolosov, if he opts not to come, and we see where this goes. But I just don't see how, you can kind of suss this out beforehand as a general manager. I just don't see the route to be able to do that.
No, for sure. I think that, listen, I mean, the optics are gonna look bad. I mean, that's just the truth. The optics are gonna look bad, particularly if the organization is denied, and if it does turn out that that Dynamo does ask can we arrange for another alone one more season, whatever, or he doesn't report or whatever the case might be, they're going to be, oh well, they threw up a smoke screen and they knew all along he wasn't coming. That that's going to be the narrative. It just will be. I think that I feel a pretty high level of confidence that they're being truthful when they say we expect him to come over, because we had no indication that he's not. The player didn't ask for it. No other team asked for it. And also given the fact, again, that we're about a month from the regular season starting in Russia. So they need to get ready, too. So if it were to happen, it would happen very, very soon.
Yeah.
They need to figure their roster out. And they have their own season to get ready for. So,
yeah, I mean, their training camp probably starts next week.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, the timing also is what it is. A year before, Artem Anisimov would have been very happy to take him everywhere he went. I mean, he would have done for Kolosov, mind you, position play versus goalies, and goalies socialize. They hang out with the other goalies, whatever. Their goalie coach, whatever the case might be. But again, I mean, he was brought in with the team. As you said, late in the season, it's hard to really incorporate somebody. But nobody shunned him. It wasn't like anybody in the locker room didn't come talk to him or offer to show him around or whatever. A lot of players, when they come over, stay at that Renaissance hotel that's attached
to the building. Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody walked with them, showed them that, you have any questions, you need help ordering food, whatever the case might be for your most basic needs, is provided for. It is a shame. Would a player like Anisimov have helped him? Yeah, probably. I mean, he helped a lot of guys, not just European guys, but just go talk to Igor Zamula about
Yeah.
how much how much Anisimov helped him, or other guys that had somebody either from the same country or been in the same situation going overseas. And you can go way back over the years. You know, there's so many examples of it, and it's not always a player from your country either.
Yeah.
You know, many years ago, slightly getting off track here, but just kind of showing what you know, having a guy who reaches out and kind of helps you out when you arrive. Many years ago, the Flyers had a player, an older player, who came over from Czechoslovakia, Miroslav Dvorak. And Miro was, I think, 32, 33 years old at the point he came over, could not speak a word of English. Well, Brad Marsh, he said the only thing I knew was the word for beer in Czech, which is pivo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a Czech dictionary. So when I thought something important to show him, I looked it up in English and I showed him the Czech word, and eventually got comfortable enough in English they could speak back and forth a little bit. And Miro and Marshy became best friends for the rest of Miro's life. You know, without speaking a word of each other's language for the first year.
Yeah.
So it certainly can happen. It doesn't always have to be somebody from your homeland. I mean, it is really nice to have a type like Brad Marsh who shows some leadership and reaches out and helps and whatever. But what I'm saying is that help will be available, whether it's another Russian player, and part of that too, just as an aside, is a lot of times older Russian players and Belarusian players and European players in general, they don't really want to play in the AHL.
No, they go back home.
Yeah, they'd rather go back home where the money's not NHL money, but easier travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they'd rather play in the NHL than their home country, but they'd rather play in their home country than the AHL. So it's not always the easiest thing to line somebody up. It just happened to work out a couple years ago with Anisimov. So it was something that was said even before the exit day and things when the summertime and all the reports started to surface. They would like to get somebody who could help out this season with Kolosov. And I kind of see why Michkov's going to have a support system around him too.
I thought it was interesting that he said it, in that press conference, his introductory one, that his mom and his brother are coming over next month. I think that's great.
Something like that. I don't know, like Kolosov's girlfriend. She might come over for a while. They can find ways to help him out. Living in the hotel. I mean, players come over for camp. They're living in a hotel in Voorhees. Like, you don't have the language barrier, but still, some of these guys they're in the U.S. for the first, like, live their whole life in Canada or wherever. It's an adjustment. There are off ice adjustments that are part of it, and for a goalie, the on ice adjustments are in some ways more significant too. It's a very different game over there.
Very pronounced difference. Yeah, I think it's funny, but that a lot of the people that are saying, how did they not have a Russian veteran player there to help them out, are also the people to say, why are you signing guys like Eric Johnson? It's just as important to have veteran leaders on an NHL team, even though they're not in their prime, to help young players navigate the rigors, the expectations, and everything that goes along with being an NHL player. You got to have those guys. I think that's pretty funny and kind of a contradiction that those oftentimes are the same people. Bill, one of the things that's been floated as to why he wasn't happy as well is because Fedotov just came flying over out of nowhere, and people are speculating that there was a promise that he would come over and jump right to the NHL. First of all, I would find that very hard to believe for a goaltender in Kolosov's position, albeit a very high goalie prospect. I think I would really doubt that there was any kind of promise that, hey, when you come over after your KHL season in Dynamo Minsk, that you're going to jump into the NHL. I don't buy that for 1 second that would have been any sort of promise, and he feels blocked now. Even
Sergei Bobrovsky, who did end up jumping direct from the KHL to the NHL, that wasn't expected or promised.
No.
He came over and they saw him in Canada. Oh my God, this kid is so good. We think he's ready. We actually think he's ready now. He can, and he did. But there aren't a lot of Sergei Bobrovskys out there that can do that.
A lot of people will cite Shesterkin and Sorokin, but they came over at 25 years of age. Big difference. And played in the AHL.
Yeah, they came over old. They came over as older players. Exactly. Lundqvist was a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
Coming over from Sweden. Dominic Hasek, some would say, was the best goalie ever. Certainly is in the argument. When he came over, he served as a backup for a while.
Yep.
He was backing up Ed Belfour in Chicago, and he ended up in Buffalo, and he got his chance to start. But not even he jumped across the pond, and all of a sudden, he's a number one NHL goalie. It takes time. Goalies take longer than any other position, and I'd be shocked. If he was just said, "Hey, you come over, you'll be up with the Flyers, and you'll be playing in no time." How it happened.
I don't buy that for a minute. Very few Tom Barrassos out there anymore. Calder, I think, is a 19-year-old. You just don't see that very often in today's game. Let's get to some of the Ask Billy questions. Oh, real quick, before we get to the Ask Billy questions, there was a big signing. We had the Michkov introductory presser, which I thought came off well, but the signing and the extension of Travis Konecny, 8 times 8.75, and boy, this one lit the hair on fire of Flyers Twitter as well, Bill. Some people, it doesn't fit the timeline. I made this point last week. And look, it's a long contract. It's basically 9 years now. He's got the 1 year remaining and 8+ years beyond that. Yeah, the cap's going to go up. And I can see both sides of the argument. But if people say, well, the last 5 years of his deal or 4 years of his deal, they're not going to be ready to win till then. And to me, I look at it and go, they're going into a minimum the third year of this rebuild. If it takes 6 to 8 years in a rebuild, I'm out. It should never take that long. Yeah, it does take some teams that long, like Buffalo or some other teams around the league, Ottawa. But that's because they didn't done anything right. Right. A rebuild should not take that long in any league that's got free agency.
Exactly, and even in places where the rebuild took a long time. In a lot of cases, let's look at Colorado, for example.
Yeah, that was a double.
It was like a rebuild, and then decide this rebuild isn't working. We need to rejigger it and rebuild again, basically. With
Nathan MacKinnon, by the way.
Yeah, with MacKinnon, with Landeskog, etc. Even Randon came in. But yeah, it was the two-phase thing, because at first Matt Duchene was going to be the guy they built around.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite. And Matt Duchene became a good player, but he didn't become the franchise player they were expecting.
And Ryan O'Reilly was there back then too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so they had to take a step back and then do another rebuild. When they did the second rebuild, obviously it resulted in a cup and they're a contender now. But had Matt Duchene been what they thought he was going to be, again, good player, but never became the really franchise player. If he had been that, it wouldn't have taken as long. And the
lottery they lost it turned out to be their gain because they ended up with Cale Makar.
Right, exactly. And
they bitched up and down about losing that lottery because they were the worst team in the league by far that year.
And to their credit, right, they took a gamble. The gamble not being that they couldn't tell Makar was a high upside prospect. The gamble being that he coming from Junior A hockey into collegiate hockey, and whenever you pick a player from Junior A, there's a risk there because he hasn't played a level of competition that you feel comfortable. That's why you generally draft from leagues that are either major, junior, or college, U.S. national team, whatever the case might be. And they took a little bit of a leap of faith, and obviously it paid off for them. But if you're in a situation like Buffalo, where you're 14 years removed from your last playoff appearance, you didn't do it right. If you're
that's an organizational failure. That is not how long a rebuild should take.
Exactly, and with Konecny, the Flyers had to be letting this play out over this next season, and potentially either A, getting a lesser return close to the deadline because he's a rental at that point to somebody, or B, the worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario was at the end of the year you can't come to any agreement and he walks for nothing.
Yeah, Panarin.
So exactly. precisely where I was going with it. So you had to make the decision now. Decision A was trade him and try to get the best package you can now, where there's a season left on it, or you extend them. And the preference was, to extend them. Whether that's the right decision or the wrong decision over the long haul, we'll see. As you said, it's really a 9-year commitment. Am I nervous about a 9-year commitment? Damn right, I'm nervous about a 9-year commitment. There's very few players I wouldn't be nervous about a 9-year commitment with. The cap hit, the 874 cap hit. I knew that was going to be the price of doing business there. It was going to be a very similar contract to Timo Meyer's. And incidentally, if you want to look at because a lot of times agents and teams, they'll use model contracts that already are in the league. Well, if you look at Meyer and you look at Konecny, same age, different kind of player, obviously, but same age, both
draft year,
same draft, first round picks in the same draft year.
Yeah.
And then you look at their career points per game, both of them exactly 0.71 points per game, exactly. So Meyer gets the 8-year deal, and a year earlier because his contract was expired sooner. So his contract will run 2 fewer years just because it started 2 years sooner. But still, same cap hit, same term of 8 years. And if you were going to sign Konecny, $10 million never sounded like that sounded like a start. That sounded like a starting figure. You negotiate down from there, and then you negotiate more term. You get the choice ultimately. Okay, do you want the $10 million for a shorter term deal, 4 or 5 years, or do you want the maximum extension, and it decreases in the latter years of the contract. The last 2 years of it are partial no trade rather than a complete no movement clause. I think ideally you'd like the partial no trade to kick in a little earlier than the final 2 years. But they finally came to an agreement that both sides felt they could live with, at least for the next several years. I think that it's about the best the Flyers were going to do in terms of cap hit wise, and you need other pieces to come together around them. But if you move Konecny and you're getting more unproven players, more first round picks, you're adding a lot more assets. But you have less to work with. You have less to build around that
known commodity,
are known commodities for your top six, your top line, whatever the case might be. So the Flyers, only time will tell if the Flyers made the right move. But it wasn't, it was an understandable contract, both the structure of it, the cap hit, and the timing for when and why it happened.
Yeah, and TK will be featured in Wednesday's episode. I had a chance to talk to him on Friday. He did not want it to bleed into the season, and he did want to make the commitment to be here, the team that drafted him. And he said, if I went somewhere else and won a cup, it wouldn't mean the same. It would, but as it did with winning it here, because what he's gone through here as a from a kid now to he's all grown up at this point. It's pretty crazy. But congrats to him on the contract, and like you said, ultimately. The grade will be in on that draft when it's all set, or that contract when it's all said and done. We just don't know. Is there risk? Absolutely in a 9-year deal for a player at this point in his career, for sure. All right, let's get to some Ask Billy questions here. First one comes from Harrison. He says, simple for me, who gets traded to get the Flyers under the cap comfortably? We know they have some LTIR options here as well, Bill, but do they have to make a move here to make themselves more cap compliant comfortably?
Ideally, you never want to. You don't want to have to use the long-term injury reserve because you end up with overages once bonuses get paid out, and then it comes off your cap next year, and that becomes a cycle you don't want to get yourself into. Maybe if Rasmus Ristolainen proves that he's healthy, he's making a lot of money for a guy who's most likely going to play in the third pairing. So Risto might be a guy who might get moved. Other guys don't necessarily make a ton on the cap, or it's going to save you that much.
Yeah.
So, could a guy like Joel Farabee get moved? Yeah, but I think that would have to be a hockey trade. Whereas Ristolainen, if he shows he's healthy, more as a cap driven thing as much as anything else. Might be the kind of guy you might move to get a little breathing.
Lee says, any word on the status of Rasmus Ristolainen, injury or rehab? To me, it's been one of those things that's like, even last year during the season, it was kind of a forgotten storyline. Yeah. Where's Risto?
Yeah, and then that will be something that will be a little clearer in September.
Yeah,
if he's missing time, either practice days, sitting on this or that for precautionary reasons, I'll be concerned. Because this was a situation last year that it started out as a day-to-day thing, and then it just, he missed the start of the season too, if you remember this time there, and then missed most of the second half of the season. So I think they're being cautious and saying he's 100%, he's ready to go. But that's a very, very fair question, and I think it's one that really won't be answered until we see him on the ice and playing, and hopefully in the opening night lineup. I'll be a lot more comfortable about it then.
Todd Shannon, for an Ask Billy question, says there seems to be a logjam of young defensemen competing for that 5 to 6 slot. He said, how do you think things play out with Hunter McDonald, Emil Andre, Adam Yinning, and Ronnie Attard, both short-term and long-term? I think McDonald is ticketed for the AHL. He could maybe be a call-up at some point this year. I thought he impressed at development camp. Emil Andre was impressive last year, Bill, but ultimately showed that he needed more time in the AHL, really to handle the physicality and the sheer size and strength of NHL players. He really took a beating in board battles, I thought. And I think he could use more time there. The question is, with Yinning and Attard, where do they fit in? And maybe Ristolainen plays a part in that. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, if Risto were to move, maybe that's a spot for Attard on the right side, maybe. The thing with Attard is that he's no longer waiver exempt. So, and not that I necessarily think he'd be claimed, because, older player, older prospect or whatever, there might be more opportunity for a call up and maybe a long-term stay. I think the feeling is that Jennings is about as ready as he's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a really good first season with the Phantoms, slow start last year, and then he picked things up as the season went along. They like a lot of things about Jennings.
He didn't look overwhelmed, Bill, when he was with the Flyers in the year either.
No, he didn't. He looked like he felt like he belonged.
Poised, yeah.
Plays the same game, whether it's the American League or the NHL too.
Yeah.
Whereas Attard, I think, needs a little bit of a adjustment between the American League and the NHL.
Structure, needs to get it under control a little bit.
Yeah, and particularly because he's a guy who loves to fire the puck. Has that big heavy shot, and he can score some. But I think Attard still has to figure out a little bit of who he is at the NHL level.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Jennings knows what he is, and the organization knows what he is, and whether that's a solid third pair guy or not, probably about where he'd play. But he has a lot of good fundamentals about him. Keeps good gaps, good stick, blocks a lot of shots. He's physical. I mean, all those elements. He just needs an opportunity in a spot. Right now, there probably isn't a spot because the number and I mean the one thing with Erik Johnson is especially knowing that he's not ticketed to start every year. He's going to be scratched a good deal. So, if he plays about as much as Stahl did a year ago,
36 games maybe at tops,
something like that, 25 to 35, 36 games, depending on injuries and whatever else might be going on. That's about right. I don't want a player who still has a chance at a call up. That's one thing, that final step or find some fine tuning to mainly sit around.
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes that 7 spot, or if you carry 8, or even if you carry 8 defensemen.
Yeah, he's got to play.
He has to play. So exactly, he needs a place to play if there's not a spot. I wouldn't worry about a waiver claim, because most teams have a player similar to that in
their system.
They are already in their system. So hopefully there will be an opportunity at some point, and he'll make the most of the opportunity.
Kenny, let's combine two here. Kenny says, hashtag Ask Billy, who are some players that can make the team out of camp or at least get a 5-10 game look at the beginning of the year or the regular season? Barkey, Bonk, or Tuamala. And Brian says, aside from Michkov, what other rookies have a shot at making the team out of camp, and who might be a midseason call-up? Let's take the three names Kenny broke out first and foremost. I don't think Barkey is a guy that's going to get a look and get sent back to juniors. I think he definitely needs more time there, not because he's not a dynamic player, but he needs to put more muscle on. But Tuamala and Bonk, Bill, where are you on those two guys? I think Bonk kind of surprised them with his development last year. I think he surprised him a little bit at development camp too, and it still is. He's in town still working out. I think they're a little surprised at the maturity of the young man on and off the ice and the development for which he kind of experienced last year.
Yeah, I would say that the odds favor one more junior year. I think he's American League ready right now, but the rules don't allow it.
Yeah.
So would I rather he go and dominate in the Ontario League or potentially struggle in the NHL? I'd rather he go to the OHL and dominate, particularly if you're a defenseman. I really think you need to be cautious with defensemen. Now, maybe he comes in and he has such a good camp. Maybe you do take that look at him for 9 games and before he hits that 10-game mark and you have to decide and burn a year or send him back. But I would say the odds are that he goes back for another junior year. Tuamala had such a good first half last year for the Phantoms. Played the American League All-Star game and was really looked good. Then he hit the wall in the second half, and then he had an injury. He was unavailable in the playoffs. I think the feeling was though that he needed at least another half year in the American League. Plus, the Flyers are so stacked. Right wing, that's a spot where they're not really necessarily looking for a guy to break through. He's not a candidate to play center. So I think Samu goes back to the Phantoms. Hopefully he does what he does last year and doesn't have that dip and as the season
completes it as a year, sees it through.
And if he can do that, then I think he has a very good shot at it.
Let's get to one more here. It comes from Eddie. I think it's Reeboks. He's got a kind of a strange font. He says, while there's been so much negativity over this being, quote, the same team as last year, doesn't it make more sense for us to proceed as we have been? He said, I'd rather not lose a trade or overpay for someone to fill an on-paper slot before knowing what chemistry will be with 39 in the mix. And it's something I want to touch on in this episode, Bill, because this has been an underwhelming offseason, not from a storyline standpoint and, Flyers Twitter. It's been a pepper pot. But for change, the year prior, John Tortorella said, we have to first have subtraction and then we're going to backfill. And we saw Provorov, James Van Riemsdyk, Tony DeAngelo, some big names depart, and some backfilling took place with a guy like Mark Stahl or a guy like Garnet Hathaway who was extended. But you look at it this offseason, and it has been underwhelming. And people go, well, you're in a rebuild. You're not building anything this offseason. You extended Hathaway a year early. Or, some of the moves you made, why do you make those moves now? And where's the 1C? Where's the top pairing defenseman? To me, I'm not going to judge Danny Briere this offseason. To me, the thought I have is that this is kind of the precursor to the preview to the main event. I'm not going to do things this offseason just to do things. It looks to me like, okay, when we can be aggressive in free agency, also in the trade market, then that's when I'll be aggressive as a GM. They're calling this Ron Hextall 2.0. And look, maybe in 5 years it is. But I'm not going to even think about making that judgment until there's cap, fiscal flexibility in there. And I just don't think, I talked to Danny Briere, I don't think he's a GM that needs the money, that needs to keep his job by being safe. I mean, he and I talked about the exact opposite of that. I just don't think he's going to make a move and, make a move to placate a fan base in a rebuild right now when it's not going to be something that's going to make a big difference. You're not in position to do that right now.
Yeah, I mean this year's free agent crop is not an overwhelming one anyway, league wide. And B, I mean, I think the Flyers certainly would make an aggressive trade if their target is there and if they can get it done within some kind of reason. Those are two big ifs. It's why sometimes, I mean, a lot of people ask about the 1C in particular. Well, the truth of the matter is they don't hit free agency very often. They're very hard to trade for, and the best route is by the draft. Unless you get lucky, chances are you have to find that guy at the top of the draft. Either that or something panics, makes a move. It's easier said than done in a lot of cases. That the one
There's not a lot of Bergerons out there not taking,
Yeah, exactly. And Bergeron was a second round pick, and et cetera. I mean,
Braden Point.
Yeah. Then those guys, it happens. It happens, but you have to be the team that's lucky enough to get that guy, and he exceeds all expectations. You might have a ceiling for him, but he actually hits it. So it's hard. The 1C is going to take time. It is. You're going to have to try to build in other ways and add that 1C piece later on when you can. Same with a true number one defenseman. Hard to add, hard to trade for. You hope the guy develops in your system. And I remember, even when you go back to Derek Desjardins, there were Flyers fans, and it's kind of funny to think of it. He's not a true 1D. Well, then who's a true 1D? Like Ray Bourque, Chris Pronger, right? He was a frequent all-star, high-end defenseman. Would have played at anybody's blue line, at least in the top three, even for elite teams. It's the hardest thing to find, and it takes time. And I don't know that there was a defenseman this year's draft and a defenseman heavy draft. You can say this is it. This is a guaranteed, almost can't miss franchise defenseman, like a Drew Doughty was, like a Victor Hedman was. That kind of a level of player. You're very, very, very sure, close to positive. Chris Pronger, he's not going to miss. He's going to be a star. They don't come along too often. And even this year, I know a lot of people will ask about Zev Buin, Zeev Buin, depending on how you want to pronounce his name. I can't tell you that he's going to be a Norris Trophy kind of defenseman. I think he's going to be a good one. Had the Flyers not traded back a spot and had they taken Buin, I'd have been fine with it, very comfortable with the pick. But can I guarantee that he's going to get a Norris Trophy?
That checks that box of top number one D-man.
I can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee that for the other defensemen who were picked this year too. And there were quite a few defensemen who I liked in the draft. It takes the right draft, the right draft spot, the right development, and just a little bit of luck too. So the Flyers need all these things to hit that next level. I can't put a timetable on when they're going to be able to do it. I don't know that there's a trade out there that they or another team could make. When a team has that level of player, they tend not to trade them. They tend to lock them up long term. So hopefully the Flyers will find a player of that caliber at center and on defense in the upcoming years, and that would take a rebuild to that next level where you're going from a non-playoff team to a bubble team, to a team is going to make the playoffs, to a contender, to a serious contender that might even come out of the East and potentially even win it all. Those things I cannot put a timeline on, but those things would be huge things to add if and when they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look kind of for the poster child team of a team that's not done it through the draft and won a cup, you look at Vegas. You have a number one center, you trade for Eichel, right? A crazy situation in Buffalo, they get him out of there. They end up signing Alex Pietrangelo. You have that stud D. The goaltending has kind of been, after Marc-Andre Fleury, has been a bit of a carousel, but whether it was Robin Lehner or, all the different faces that have been back there backstopping that team. But they're in Marchessault, the way they did it shows that doing it that way maybe is not the easiest path, but they found a way, which means, but you have to be on the lookout for those situations. If a situation of uncomfortability regarding a certain player or a center, one of the targets you have, develops with a certain team, then that's when you need to swoop in. So we'll see if that that opportunity presents itself at some point, or how you go about that. And it's interesting to see what players opt to go to free agency come next year and the year after as well, and maybe decide to or to not sign with their team. And you're looking right at two guys in Edmonton, for example, right? Do they want to stay there and get crushed with the exorbitant tax situation? Like, I just put out that info regarding Konecny's contract, what it would yield if he was in Florida, how much less he brings home here, and how much less he'd bring home if he was in Toronto. It's a pronounced difference, and you look at these guys and you go, yeah, they're getting life-changing money, but you still want more life-changing money if you can bring it home and rather not write a check to the government. Bill, we certainly tackled a lot in this episode. That may be our longest one of the calendar year for sure. So things have not been quiet. Great stuff. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. Travis Konecny will be our guest on Wednesday's episode, final day of the month of July. So everybody enjoy your couple of days. We'll talk to you Wednesday on a brand new Flyers Daily.